The hallways of the Confederation flagship Eternal Harmony gleamed with an unnatural perfection that still made Captain Frank Miller uncomfortable even after 3 years aboard. The massive vessel housed representatives from over 50 alien species, but Frank often felt more alone here than he ever had back on Earth. He straightened his blue diplomatic uniform as he approached the large doors to the War Council chamber. The guards, tall, four-armed Jurians with scaled skin that shimmered under the soft lighting, stared at him with their usual mixture of distrust and curiosity. "Captain Miller," the guard on the left said, "you understand the observation protocols?" Frank nodded. He understood them all too well. "I will not speak unless directly addressed. I will not offer tactical suggestions. I am present only as Earth's mandated witness." The words tasted bitter in his mouth. The doors slid open, revealing a circular room with a massive holographic display in the center. Around it stood or floated the military leaders of the Galactic Confederation's primary species. Frank took his assigned seat at the far edge of the room, the one with the poorest view of the tactical display. Lieutenant Kate Walsh was already there, her red hair pulled back in a tight bun, her face carefully neutral. But Frank knew her well enough to see the tension in her shoulders. She had been the youngest tactical officer ever to graduate from the North American Military Academy, and being relegated to silent observer status was a constant frustration. "They're losing," she whispered as Frank sat beside her. "The Vraxians took Outpost Delta 9 yesterday," Frank replied quietly. 3,000 Confederation troops dead or captured. The holographic display flickered and changed to show the current battle lines. The Vraxian Empire's forces, represented by red markers, had pushed deep into Confederation space in just 3 months of fighting. Blue Confederation positions were rapidly retreating from the outer systems. Admiral Genthar, the 7-foot-tall Arcturian who served as Supreme Commander of Confederation forces, raised one of his 4 hands for silence. His skin, the color of burnished copper, seemed duller than usual. Frank recognized the signs of stress. "The Vraxian advance continues unabated," Genthar announced. "Their 3rd Fleet has broken through our defenses at the Regulus sector. We anticipate an attack on the Sirius Junction within 15 standard days." A murmur went through the assembled leaders. If the Vraxians took the Sirius Junction, they would have direct access to the Confederation's core worlds. Frank felt Kate shift beside him. She was writing something on her datapad. He glanced down and saw a simple tactical diagram showing how the Confederation forces could reposition to create a trap at Sirius. It was brilliant, it was obvious, and it was something they couldn't share. "We will reinforce our position at Sirius with the 4th and 7th Fleets," Admiral Genthar continued. "We will maintain our standard defensive formation and repel their advance." Frank bit his tongue. The standard defensive formation had failed 6 times already against the Vraxians' flanking maneuvers. Kate's hand tightened around her stylus until her knuckles turned white. Commander Loxarian, a gelatinous being from one of the water worlds, pulsed with blue light as it spoke. "Perhaps we should consider alternative strategies. Our current approach has not been effective." "What alternatives do you suggest?" asked General Vryn of the Pleiadian Guard, her feathered crest rising in irritation. "The humans," Loxarian began, then paused as the room went silent. Every eye, ocular sensor, and sensory appendage turned toward Frank and Kate. "The humans have experience with this type of warfare. Perhaps their input would be valuable." General Vryn's feathers flattened against her skull. "We all remember why humans were banned from participating in Confederation military actions. Do you wish to repeat the Luna incident?" Frank remained expressionless, though the mention of Luna made his stomach clench. One human ship, the UES Defiant, had managed to defeat 3 Pleiadian cruisers by executing a maneuver so reckless that no alien commander would have considered it possible. The human captain had used her own damaged vessel to knock an asteroid into the path of the Pleiadian ships. The resulting collision had killed over 200 Pleiadians and turned the tide in humanity's first and last interstellar battle. "That was 50 years ago," Loxarian countered, "and we are losing this war." Admiral Genthar raised his hand again. "The ban on human military participation was unanimously approved by the Security Council. It cannot be overturned in this Chamber. We will proceed with the established strategy. The meeting continued for another hour, with various commanders reporting on their sectors and receiving their orders. Frank and Kate dutifully recorded everything, though they knew their reports back to Earth would change nothing. Humanity was part of the Confederation but excluded from its defense. As the meeting ended and the commanders filed out, Frank was surprised to feel a hand on his shoulder. He turned to find Admiral Genthar standing behind him. "Walk with me, Captain Miller," the Admiral said, his deep voice quieter than usual. Frank nodded to Kate, who looked as surprised as he felt, and followed the tall alien into a small side chamber. The door closed behind them with a soft hiss. "Speak freely, Captain," Genthar said, his 4 violet eyes focused intently on Frank's face. "What do you think of our strategy?" Frank hesitated, unsure if this was some kind of test. "Sir, I'm not permitted to offer tactical assessments. I am not asking officially." The Admiral's voice had an edge of desperation Frank had never heard before. "I am asking as one military man to another. What would humans do in this situation?" Frank took a deep breath. "We would not mass our forces at Sirius Junction, sir. That's exactly what the Vraxians expect. And what would you do instead?" "We would set a trap, but not the one they're expecting." Frank found himself explaining Kate's plan from the datapad, the words rushing out after being held back for so long. "The Vraxians rely on their superior numbers. We'd use that against them." Genthar listened silently, his expression unreadable. When Frank finished, the Admiral was quiet for a long moment. "Interesting," he finally said. "Very interesting." A distant alarm sounded and Genthar straightened. "I must go. Thank you for your unofficial input, Captain." As the Admiral left, Frank stood alone in the small chamber, his heart racing. For the first time in 3 years, someone had actually asked for his opinion. When he returned to their small office, Kate was already compiling their daily report. "What did he want?" she asked without looking up. "He wanted to know what humans would do," Frank replied, still hardly believing it himself. Kate's head snapped up, her green eyes wide. "And you told him?" Frank nodded. "I told him everything." "Do you think it will make any difference?" Before Frank could answer, their communication console chimed with an urgent message. The Vraxian Third Fleet had destroyed the Confederation outpost at Proxima Centauri. The path to Sirius Junction was now wide open. "It has to," Frank said quietly. "Otherwise, this war is already lost." The emergency meeting of the Confederation Security Council was already in full swing when Frank and Kate arrived. They stood at the back of the large chamber, watching alien diplomats argue loudly about the latest Vraxian victories. 3 fleets, destroyed in less than a week, said Representative Korn, a small avian being whose feathers were ruffled in distress. The Sirius Junction could fall any day now. Admiral Genthar stood at the center of the chamber, his copper skin now looking almost gray with exhaustion. "Our conventional tactics have failed against the Vraxian advance. We must consider alternatives." The room went quiet. Frank felt his heart rate quicken. "What alternatives?" asked Ambassador Lyrixian of the Phaedon Republic. The tall, thin alien's translucent skin revealed the rapid flow of blue fluid through his veins, a sign of agitation in his species. Admiral Genthar's 4 violet eyes briefly found Frank at the back of the room. "I propose we formally consult with human military experts, not as combatants but as strategic advisors." The chamber erupted in protests. Ambassador Lyrixian's voice rose above the others. "Have you forgotten the Luna incident? 1 human ship defeated 3 of our cruisers by crashing an asteroid into them. Their tactics are reckless and unpredictable." "Their tactics are effective," Genthar countered, "and at this moment, effectiveness is what we need." Kate leaned close to Frank. "Is this really happening?" she whispered. "I think my conversation with the Admiral made an impression," Frank replied quietly. The debate continued for hours. Frank and Kate stood silently, protocol forbidding them from speaking unless directly addressed. Finally, a vote was called. By the narrowest margin possible, the Council approved the formation of a human advisory unit with severe restrictions. Their recommendations would be reviewed by Confederation Command before implementation, and humans would remain prohibited from direct combat. As the Council members filed out, Admiral Genthar approached Frank and Kate. "Captain Miller, Lieutenant Walsh, report to my command center in 1 hour. Bring your tactical assessments. All of them." Exactly 1 hour later, Frank and Kate entered the Admiral's private command center. They were surprised to find 2 other humans already there. General Lisa Ortega and Commander Daniel Blackwood had been secretly transported from Earth at the Admiral's request. Lisa Ortega was a legend, the architect of the unified Earth defense strategy that had impressed the Confederation during first contact. Her dark hair was streaked with gray, but her eyes were sharp and alert. Daniel Blackwood was younger, with a reputation as Earth's most brilliant naval tactician. "Captain, Lieutenant." General Ortega nodded at them. "Seems we're finally being asked to the dance." Admiral Genthar gestured to the large tactical display, showing the current state of the war. The red markers of Vraxian forces had pushed alarmingly close to the center of Confederation space. "We have limited time," the Admiral said. "The Vraxians will reach Sirius Junction within days. I need your assessment and recommendations immediately." For the next several hours, the 4 humans reviewed battle data and identified critical weaknesses in Confederation tactics: predictable attack formations, reluctance to sacrifice resources, and inflexible command structures. "The problem is fundamental," Commander Blackwood explained, pointing to recordings of previous battles. "Your ships always maintain formation, even when breaking formation would save them. Your commanders follow the same tactical doctrines in every situation. The Vraxians have figured out your playbook," Kate added. "They know exactly what you'll do before you do it." General Ortega stepped forward. "We need to change the game entirely, something the Vraxians won't expect." "What do you propose?" "Admiral," Genthar asked. "First, stop moving your fleets as single units," Frank said. "Break them into smaller, more agile groups that can attack from multiple vectors." "Second," Kate continued, "use your civilian mining vessels to create traps. Those ships can deploy explosive ore fragments in nebula zones where Vraxian sensors are compromised." Blackwood pointed to a specific sector on the map. "Third, start leaking false information about your fleet positions. Make them think you're somewhere you're not." Admiral Genthar looked troubled. "These suggestions violate centuries of Confederation military doctrine." "That's exactly why they'll work," General Ortega said firmly. "The Vraxians have studied your doctrine too. They're counting on you to follow it." Their discussion was interrupted by an urgent communication. The Vraxian forces had broken through the last defense line before Sirius Junction. The path to the Confederation's core worlds was now open. The Admiral's face hardened. "I must present your recommendations to the Council immediately." An emergency session was called. Frank, Kate, Ortega, and Blackwood stood at attention as Admiral Genthar outlined their strategy to the assembled representatives. The reaction was immediate and negative. Sacrificing ships as decoys, intentionally leaking information, using mining vessels as weapons. Ambassador Larixian was practically vibrating with indignation. "These tactics are dishonorable." "They will save lives," Admiral Genthar responded. "Both military and civilian." "The Vraxians don't fight with honor," General Ortega added when directly addressed by the Council. "They fight to win. So should you." Before the Council could vote, another emergency alert sounded. The Vraxian main fleet had entered the Sirius Junction. They were mere days from reaching the core worlds. The Council chamber fell silent. Fear was evident on every alien face. "We have no choice," said Representative Quarn quietly. "We must try something different or face extinction." The vote was unanimous this time. The human strategy was approved with one significant change. The restrictions on the Human Advisory Unit were temporarily suspended. As they left the chamber, Admiral Genthar turned to the 4 humans. "You are now authorized to directly coordinate our remaining forces. The fate of the Confederation is in your hands. What's our first move? Kate asked as they hurried toward the command center. Frank looked at his fellow humans, saw the same determination in their eyes that he felt in his heart. We changed the rules of the game. General Ortega nodded grimly. The Vraxians think they know what they're fighting against. They're about to learn differently. They're about to learn why humans were banned from galactic wars, Commander Blackwood added. As they entered the command center, the staff fell silent, watching the humans with a mixture of hope and apprehension. Admiral Genthar stepped aside, giving Frank access to the main command console. Captain Miller, the Admiral said formally, you have operational control of Confederation forces. What are your orders? Frank took a deep breath. 50 years of exclusion ended in this moment. He placed his hands on the console and began giving commands that would forever change how the galaxy viewed humanity. The main command center of the Eternal Harmony transformed overnight. Where once stood neat rows of stations with aliens calmly monitoring displays, there was now a hurricane of activity. At the center of this storm stood the 4 humans, issuing orders that shocked the Confederation officers but were obeyed nonetheless. Disperse the 7th Fleet into 5 separate battle groups, Frank ordered, his fingers moving across the holographic display. Each group will use a different approach vector to the Proxima system. An Arcturian commander hesitated. Captain Miller, dividing our forces goes against every principle of Confederation strategy. Exactly, Kate said from her station. The Vraxians have studied your principles. They expect you to gather your forces for a direct confrontation. We won't give them what they expect. General Ortega was working with the communications team, deliberately leaking false intelligence about a massive Confederation fleet gathering at Tau Ceti. Make sure the encryption is good enough to seem secure, but weak enough that their best codebreakers can crack it within 12 hours, she instructed. Meanwhile, Commander Blackwood coordinated with the Civilian Mining Guild. I need every mining vessel with explosive charge capability at these coordinates, he said, marking points in the dense nebula between Sirius and Proxima. They'll be laying specialized minefields. Frank watched the tactical display as their orders were carried out. Small blue markers representing Confederation ships moved into positions no alien commander would have chosen. Mining vessels, represented by green dots, began gathering near the nebula. The trap was being set. Admiral Genthar approached, his violet eyes studying the display. You're sacrificing the Proxima system, he observed. We're offering it as bait, Frank corrected. According to intelligence, the Vraxians believe Proxima contains a major Confederation supply base. In reality, we've already evacuated all civilians and moved any valuable resources, Ortega finished. But we've left enough evidence to make them think it's a critical target. The Admiral looked troubled. And once they commit their forces to attacking Proxima? Blackwood stepped forward with a holographic projector showing detailed technical schematics. That's when we spring the real trap. He activated the projection, showing a complex device attached to the Proxima star itself. This is an experimental gravitational technology, he explained. Originally designed for stellar research, we've modified it to create a localized space-time distortion when triggered. Not powerful enough to damage the star, but enough to catch their entire fleet in a space-time bubble where normal propulsion and weapons won't function properly, Kate finished. They'll be sitting ducks for our scattered forces to pick off one by one. Admiral Genthar stared at the device. This technology was deemed too dangerous for military application by the Confederation Science Council. Everything humans do is deemed too dangerous by someone, Frank said quietly. But right now, dangerous is exactly what we need to be. The next 48 hours were tense. The scattered Confederation ships reported Vraxian scouts probing their positions, testing for weaknesses. The mining vessels completed their work in the nebula, creating invisible killing fields that would activate when triggered remotely. Tau Ceti deception successful, reported General Ortega, reviewing intercepted Vraxian communications. They've diverted 3 battle groups to counter our non-existent fleet there. Gravitational device is online and ready. Blackwood added. Proxima Star is showing nominal readings. The device is completely undetectable to their sensors. Frank studied the main display, watching the red markers representing the main Vraxian armada. They were moving exactly as predicted, gathering for what they thought would be a decisive strike against a critical Confederation resource. They've taken the bait, he said. They're committing over 60% of their total military strength to the Proxima offensive. Kate looked up from her station. Our flanking forces are in position. Mining field is armed and ready. We just need them to enter the kill zone. The command center fell silent as they watched the Vraxian fleet advance. It was an impressive sight. Hundreds of warships moving in tight formation toward what they believed was a weakly defended but strategically vital system. They're entering Proxima system now, Kate reported. Estimated time to optimal trap position, 17 minutes. Frank turned to Admiral Genthar. Once we activate the gravitational device, there's no going back. Are you prepared for the consequences? The Admiral's copper skin seemed to darken. What consequences do you foresee beyond defeating the enemy? The level of destruction will be unlike anything the Confederation has seen in centuries of warfare, Frank said honestly. This isn't a battle. It's an ambush designed for maximum enemy casualties. And if we don't do this? The Admiral asked. Then, the Vraxians reach your core worlds within a week, General Ortega replied. Billions die instead of thousands. Admiral Genthar straightened to his full height. Proceed, Captain Miller. The minutes ticked by with excruciating slowness. On the main display, they watched as the Vraxian fleet moved deeper into the Proxima system, spreading out to engage what they thought were defensive positions. They're in optimal position, Kate announced. All ships are within the effect radius. Frank took a deep breath. Commander Blackwood, activate the gravitational device. Blackwood sent the coded signal. For several seconds, nothing happened. Nervous murmurs spread through the command center. Device activation confirmed, Blackwood said, though his voice betrayed uncertainty. There should be visible effects any moment now. Still nothing happened on the display. The Vraxian ships continued their advance unaffected. Did it fail? Admiral Genthar asked, tension evident in his voice. Frank exchanged worried glances with his team. Had their plan failed? Had they sacrificed their position for nothing? Then a sensor operator called out, unusual readings from the Proxima Star. Gravitational fluctuations are increasing exponentially. On the display, the space around the Vraxian fleet began to shimmer. The neat formation of red markers started to distort, ships being pulled in different directions as space itself warped around them. It's working, Kate whispered. It's actually working. The command center watched in awe as the space-time distortion expanded, engulfing the entire Vraxian fleet. Ship markers blinked out one after another as vessels were torn apart by forces they had no defense against. Activate the mining field now, Frank ordered. When the few Vraxian ships managed to escape the gravitational trap, they fled directly into the nebula, directly into the waiting minefield. Secondary explosions bloomed. Across the tactical display, begin flanking attacks, Frank commanded. The scattered Confederation forces converged on the disoriented remnants of the once mighty Vraxian armada. Within hours, it was over. Where once had been the pride of the Vraxian Empire, there was now only debris and disabled vessels. Status. Report, Admiral Genthar requested, his voice subdued. Vraxian losses. Approximately 87% of engaged forces, Kate reported. Confederation losses. Minimal. The command center should have erupted in cheers. Instead, a heavy silence fell as the enormity of what they had done sank in. They had not won a battle. They had engineered the almost complete destruction of the enemy fleet. Send to all Confederation forces, Admiral Genthar finally said. Proxima operation successful. Prepare for counteroffensive. He turned to Frank. Captain Miller, the galaxy now understands why humans were banned from war. Frank shook his head. Not yet, he replied. But they will. News of the Proxima victory spread throughout the Confederation like a shockwave. Billions watched the footage of the Vraxian fleet being torn apart by the gravitational distortion, followed by the systematic destruction of the survivors. The reaction was mixed. Many celebrated the salvation from Vraxian conquest, while others were disturbed by the scale of destruction. 3 days after the battle, Frank and his team were summoned to the Confederation Ethics Committee. The large hearing chamber was packed with representatives from dozens of species. Some faces showed gratitude, others displayed clear horror. This hearing will determine whether the human tactics at Proxima violated Confederation warfare conventions, announced Chairperson Vela, a gaseous being contained within a transparent environmental suit. Captain Miller, please explain your rationale for employing such extreme measures. Frank stood, feeling the weight of countless alien eyes upon him. The Vraxian fleet would have reached the core worlds within days. Conventional tactics had failed repeatedly. Billions of civilian lives were at risk. We chose the option that would end the threat decisively, with minimal Confederation casualties. By destroying nearly an entire enemy fleet? Asked Ambassador Lyrixian, his translucent skin now a deep blue with emotion. Such wholesale slaughter hasn't been seen in Confederation space for 8 centuries. Kate Walsh rose to stand beside Frank. With respect, Ambassador, the Vraxians showed no mercy when they conquered the outer systems. They executed prisoners and bombed civilian centers. They understand only one language, force. General Ortega added her voice. This wasn't about revenge. It was about efficiency. The longer a war lasts, the more lives are lost on both sides. The debate raged for hours. Human military philosophy was dissected, questioned, and analyzed by beings who found it alien and disturbing. Frank noticed that although many expressed shock at their methods, none suggested they should have let the Vraxians win. As the hearing reached its conclusion, Admiral Genthar entered the chamber. Silence fell immediately. The committee has requested my perspective, the Admiral said, his voice carrying throughout the room. I authorize the human strategy with full knowledge of its potential consequences. If there is blame to be assigned, it should fall on me. He paused, looking around the chamber, but there should be no blame. Only understanding. The Vraxians left us no choice but to fight. The humans simply showed us how to fight effectively. The committee adjourned to consider their judgment. Frank and his team waited in a small antechamber, the weight of the past days heavy on their shoulders. Do you think they understand yet? Asked Commander Blackwood, breaking the silence. They're starting to, Frank replied. But understanding isn't the same as accepting. Before they could continue, an urgent communication came through. Intercepted messages revealed that the Vraxian High Command was in disarray. Their remaining forces were retreating from multiple fronts, abandoning conquered territories to consolidate. Their defenses, they're vulnerable, Kate said, studying the reports. This is our chance to end the war completely. When the Ethics Committee reconvened, they announced their decision. The human tactics, while extreme, were justified under the circumstances. No sanctions would be imposed. However, they strongly recommended that future operations be conducted with more restraint. Frank immediately requested an emergency council meeting to discuss the Vraxian retreat. In the Grand Council chamber, he presented a bold plan. The Vraxians are retreating to their core systems, he explained, pointing to the tactical display. Their fleet is fractured, their command structure in chaos. We have a unique opportunity to press our advantage and force a complete surrender. Ambassador Lyrixian rose in opposition. Haven't we seen enough destruction? Perhaps we should offer peace terms now, while we have the upper hand. Commander Blackwood shook his head. The Vraxians don't respect mercy. They see it as weakness. If we don't press our advantage, they'll regroup, adapt to our tactics, and attack again. Next time, the gravitational trap won't work. General Ortega stepped forward. We don't need to destroy their civilization. We need to demonstrate that continued aggression is futile. A targeted strike at their remaining military infrastructure would accomplish this with minimal civilian casualties. The council members looked uncertain. After centuries of defensive warfare, the concept of pressing an offensive was foreign to them. Kate addressed their hesitation directly. This is why humans were banned from your wars. Not because we're more violent, but because we understand that in war hesitation costs lives. Admiral Genthar studied the tactical display thoughtfully. What exactly do you propose, Captain Miller? Frank outlined a three-pronged attack targeting Vraxian military bases, shipyards, and command centers. No civilian targets, no planetary. Bombardment. Surgical strikes with clear objectives. Eliminate their capacity to wage war. The debate was intense. Many council members were uncomfortable with taking the offensive, even against a weakened enemy. Others saw the logic in Frank's argument but feared setting a dangerous precedent. Finally, Representative Quarn spoke up, his avian features solemn. I lost my homeworld to the Vraxians. Billions of my people are dead or enslaved. If we allow the Vraxians to rebuild their forces, they will return. They always have. One by one, other representatives of conquered worlds added their voices. The mood in the chamber shifted. The vote, when it came, was narrow but clear. The council authorized a limited offensive operation designed by the human team, but they added a significant stipulation. Frank, Kate, Ortega, and Blackwood would directly oversee the implementation from the flagship Eternal Harmony. As they left the chamber, Admiral Genthar pulled Frank aside. You realize what this means? The Council is officially suspending the ban on human military participation. Frank nodded. For this operation only. But it's a start. The Admiral's violet eyes studied him carefully. You've changed how this Confederation thinks about warfare. Captain Miller, not everyone is comfortable with that change. War isn't about comfort, Frank replied. It's about survival. And sometimes, survival requires doing the uncomfortable thing. Preparation for the counteroffensive began immediately. For the first time in 50 years, humans would officially lead Confederation forces into battle. The plan was precise, targeting Vraxian military assets while avoiding civilian casualties. As the Eternal Harmony moved into position for the operation, Frank stood on the observation deck, looking out at the stars. Kate joined him, her face reflecting the same mix of determination and concern he felt. Do you think they'll ever truly understand us? She asked quietly. Frank considered this. They understand that we're effective. They understand that we can win their wars for them, but do they understand why we fight the way we do? He shook his head. Not yet. Will they? Frank turned from the stars to look at his fellow human. They will after we show them that we're not just good at destruction, we're also good at ending wars. Below them, the massive ship hummed with activity as it prepared for the coming battle. A battle that would either confirm the Confederation's worst fears about humans or reveal a deeper truth they had yet to grasp. 3 months after the battle at Proxima, the war with the Vraxian Empire ended with a formal surrender ceremony aboard the Eternal Harmony. The massive central hall was filled with representatives from all Confederation species. At the front of the hall stood Frank, Kate, General Ortega, and Commander Blackwood, watching as the Vraxian High Command signed the surrender documents. The Vraxian Supreme Commander, a tall, gray-skinned being with 4 arms and a ridge of bony plates along his skull, looked directly at Frank as he placed his mark on the document. You fight like no species we have ever encountered, he said, his translator conveying the words in a flat tone that couldn't hide the mix of fear and respect. Behind them, Frank nodded but said nothing. The Vraxian surrender was unconditional. Their military had been systematically dismantled over the past 3 months, using strategies designed by the human team. Most remarkable to the Confederation observers was the precision of the campaign. Despite the devastating effectiveness of the human tactics, civilian casualties had been kept to a minimum. The final campaign had resulted in the lowest civilian death rate in any major Confederation conflict, though at the cost of significant military losses on both sides. As the ceremony concluded, Admiral Genthar stepped forward. The Confederation owes a great debt to our human allies, he announced. Their strategic insight turned certain defeat into victory. His 4 violet eyes scanned the crowd before settling on the human team. Today, the Confederation Security Council has voted To establish a permanent Human Strategic Advisory Division, human officers will be integrated into all major military planning departments. Murmurs spread through the hall. This was more than anyone had expected. It was a complete reversal of 50 years of policy. Furthermore, the Admiral continued, the ban on human participation in galactic conflicts is hereby formally rescinded. Frank felt Kate stiffen beside him. This was what they had worked for, what Earth had wanted since joining the Confederation. Yet the Admiral's next words showed that the Confederation had not abandoned all caution. Human military participation will be governed by a new set of guidelines and ethical oversight protocols, Genthar explained. These protocols have been developed in collaboration with Earth's governments to ensure that the unique human approach to warfare is applied responsibly. Later, during the victory celebration, Admiral Genthar presented each member of the human team with the Confederation's highest honor, the Stellar Cross, never before awarded to a human. As the celebration continued around them, the Admiral drew Frank aside to a quiet corner. There is something I wish to tell you, Captain Miller. Something that has been classified for 50 years. Frank waited, curious. The ban on human military participation was never about what your people might do to others, Genthar said quietly. It was about what contact with human military philosophy might do to us. Frank's brow furrowed. I don't understand. Most Confederation species evolved as cooperative groups, the Admiral explained. Even our predator species hunted in packs with clearly defined roles. War, for us, has always been about establishing dominance or defending territory, a larger version of natural competition. He gestured toward the celebration, where aliens of countless species mingled. But humans, your species evolved differently. You were prey animals who had to become predators to survive. You don't fight to dominate. You fight to end the fight as quickly as possible. Frank began to understand. The ban wasn't about protecting others from us. It was about protecting ourselves from becoming like you, the Admiral confirmed. Your species approaches conflict with a singularity of purpose that ours lack. You don't seek to win battles, you seek to end wars. Frank thought about this. And now? Now we understand that there are times when your approach is necessary, Genthar said. The Vraxians forced us to adapt or perish. Thanks to you, we adapted. The conversation stayed with Frank long after the celebration ended. A week later, as the human team prepared to return to Earth to help establish training programs for human officers joining Confederation forces, he shared the Admiral's words with his colleagues. So we weren't banned because we're too violent, Kate mused. We were banned because we're too efficient at violence. General Ortega nodded thoughtfully. It makes sense. The Confederation species fight wars like they're contests, with rules, expectations, and built-in limitations. We fight wars like they're existential threats that need to be eliminated as quickly as possible. Because for most of our history, they were, Commander Blackwood added. Human warfare evolved from survival, not dominance displays. As their shuttle departed the Eternal Harmony, Frank looked out at the vastness of space. Across the galaxy, alien military academies were beginning to study Earth's military history, from Alexander the Great to guerrilla warfare to modern conflict doctrine. They were learning that humans weren't banned because they were too violent, but because they had mastered the art of ending conflicts quickly and decisively. The galaxy had misjudged humanity's warrior nature. Humans weren't warmongers, they were reluctant warriors who, once committed, fought with a singular purpose, to end the fighting. When the shuttle docked at Earth's orbital station, they were greeted by government officials eager to hear about the new opportunities for humans in Confederation defense. Frank listened to their excited questions about technology sharing and strategic positions, but his mind was elsewhere. He thought about the new doctrine that was already taking shape in Confederation military theory, based on human approaches to conflict, decisive engagement with minimal prolongation. The Confederation was adapting, incorporating human efficiency while tempering it with their own ethical frameworks. That evening, Frank stood on the balcony of his apartment, looking up at the stars. Kate joined him, handing him a drink. "Do you think we've changed them?" she asked. "Yes," Frank replied. And they've changed us too. Our approach was effective, but their concern for ethical boundaries wasn't wrong. Kate nodded. So what happens now? Now we teach them everything we know about ending wars quickly, Frank said, and they teach us everything they know about preventing wars altogether. He raised his glass toward the stars, where the Confederation fleet was still visible as tiny points of light. It wasn't human aggression the galaxy feared, he said quietly. It was human efficiency. Kate raised her glass as well. To efficiency, then. To peace through efficiency, Frank corrected. Because that's what humans do best. We find the most direct path to peace, even if that path leads through war. Above them, the stars glittered in a galaxy that now understood exactly why humans had been banned from galactic wars, and why perhaps that ban had been a mistake all along.